My SIL bullied my autistic son. I defended him, and now my family sides with her. Original post. I, 32F, have a 7-year-old son who's autistic. I also divorced when we found out that Daniel, my son, was autistic. My ex-husband was ashamed of having a weirdo as a son and demanded that we give him up for adoption. I simply denied. He got mad and left. My sister-in-law, Sarah, 28F, literally hates my son. Since the day we found out he's autistic, she was constantly saying that I needed to get rid of him because I would soon feel embarrassed. She was also telling us that my ex-husband did the right thing and that I should have listened to him. Nobody has ever said anything, and I have never caused any drama because I didn't want to ruin the whole vibe, since I only see her at family gatherings. But today it happened. Even though Daniel is autistic, he's the smartest human I've ever seen. Today is my mom's birthday, so I had the chance to meet Sarah again. As she was talking, she was sometimes making small mistakes, and Daniel was the one correcting her. At some point, her face turned red. She stood up and started yelling at my son. She was calling him problematic, weird. She said that she now knew why Daniel had no friends and that his dad was right about leaving him. My son cried. It was the first time he had ever cried about a situation like this before, at least not in front of me. He usually gets a little moody when something happens to him, but we talk for a bit, and then he's smiling again. I was too shocked to say anything. I just stood up, took Daniel's hand, and left. But then I realized that leaving wouldn't make things any better, so I told Daniel to wait in the car. I went back, and everyone looked at me in shock. My parents were trying to stop me because they knew that Sarah had messed up, but I didn't really care. She hurt my son, so she should pay for it. I watched her as she was standing up and walking towards my direction, having this annoying smile on her face. I grabbed her by her neck, barely letting her breathe. I just told her, "If you ever make my son sad, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life more miserable than ever," and left. Some relevant comments followed the post. One read, "Jesus Christ, the stories I read on Reddit. How do these people even exist? An adult bullying a 7-year-old within your own family? What the flying F?" My reply was, "Cold-hearted and mean people unfortunately exist. I hope y'all never get to experience this kind of behavior from your own family." Another comment asked, "Did your family not put her in her place?" My reply, "Unfortunately not. I've started to believe that they actually agree." Someone else inquired, "What did your brother say? Is he still embarrassed for being married to such an ignorant person?" My reply, "My brother said nothing at all. He just silently told her to sit down when I returned, but nothing too special." A further comment noted, "There is something deeply wrong about a grown adult making an innocent kid cry for no good reason. Even worse when it's not even their own kid. It gets worse when you consider autism is effectively special needs. You need to be really sick in the head to even go there. Totally understand your reaction, though, but definitely be careful with someone like her too. Don't give her the power to damage you both. That kid is lucky to have you." Update, I just called my mom. The moment she answered, she started yelling. She said that I should be ashamed of ruining her birthday and that she doesn't want me to go to any family gatherings again, as I've made my ass upset. I told her I couldn't care less about how Sarah felt. The only thing I cared about was Daniel. I reminded her about the times when my SIL was talking trash about her only grandchild and asked her how she was able to keep her cool when her beloved Sarah was calling her, once again, only grandchild problematic. She answered by saying that she didn't know how to react, so the solution was silence. I asked one more thing. If she agreed with Sarah, if she was ashamed of my son. Her answer was hanging up the phone. My brother keeps ignoring my calls. I want to personally thank each and every one of you. Receiving all this support from you guys made me strong again. Because of you and the stories you told me, I have the courage to protect him even more and never give up. Thank you." More relevant comments appeared. "You're a good mother. I'm autistic, but my parents think it's demon possession. Going NC no contact was the best thing I did for myself. My kids are also neurodivergent, and I do my best to protect them. If your family didn't have your back, you don't need them. If your brother isn't calling you to apologize for his wife, you don't need him. Your responsibility is to your child and protecting him from people like your SIL. If you do choose to go and see, it hurts at first, but it does get better. I wouldn't be surprised if the distance causes the mother and brother to reevaluate the situation." My reply, "I have chosen not to contact them again for my child's sake. I know it will be hard, but I'm willing to fight for him. Sending hugs to you and your loving family. Another comment speculated, y'all know why OP's mom is taking Sarah's side? Because she sees her as her only chance of having a normal grandchild. That's all. Sorry you're going through this, OP, but you did the right thing. This had been going on long enough. It's time to go and see with the abusive family. I wouldn't have done worse, honestly, if I were you. My Phil changed the inheritance because my son has autism, despite my grandfather-in-law's dying wish to provide for him. Before we get into this story, you should know my son is 5 years old and is nonverbal autistic. When I was pregnant, my grandfather-in-law, Henry Sr., told me that if I had a son and named him Henry IV, he would inherit the family fortune of several $1 million worth of real estate and investments. This was his dying wish, that his name lived on. I, of course, didn't know that my son would be nonverbal autistic, but I agreed to it because I wanted to do what's best for the family. My grandfather-in-law told me that his will stipulated that the property be passed to his son, Henry Jr., who is my Phil, then to his son and my husband, Henry III, and then left to our son, Henry IV, who would most likely pass it on to his own son one day. Well, he passed shortly after and left everything to his son, with future intentions known and agreed upon. I had my son, Henry IV, and I thought that would be the end of it, until a week ago. My Phil has 2 sons, Henry, my husband, the oldest, and Michael, who is the middle child. Henry, my husband, is hardworking, good with money, and reliable. My Bill, on the other hand, is not. He can't hold a job. He has multiple kids from different moms that he barely sees, let alone takes care of. He's also been in and out of rehab or jail for petty theft or drug use, etc., nothing major, over the last decade. He's been given every opportunity to turn his life around and refuses each time. He's been given cars, job opportunities, and places to live that other people, who don't have wealthy parents to fall back on, would kill for. He never takes it seriously and always takes it for granted. The only reason he is alive right now is due to being constantly bailed out or enabled by my mill. Most recently, we've given him our house, at my mill's suggestion, so he could have a place to stay after he got out of rehab, and to give him a safe place for his kids to visit so he could try to build a relationship with them. My husband and I needed a bigger place for our growing family anyway, so we agreed to it and bought a second home. Michael moved into the first. He now pays the mortgage and whatever is needed to maintain the property. It's been a few months, and surprisingly, he's been making the payments on time despite not having a job. I suspect Mill has been giving him the money. I thought everything was fine until last Sunday when we got together for dinner. My Bill mentioned how he couldn't wait to move to his new place. I asked what he was talking about, and he said he was moving into my grandfather-in-law's house. Excuse me? I pulled my husband and Phil into the other room and asked what was going on. My husband had no idea, but my Phil told me that he was changing the will. He planned to leave the property and investment money my grandfather left behind for our son to Michael. My husband's sister, Laura, would be getting my Phil's property and smaller portfolio. Normally, I wouldn't care, but this property was promised to my son. My son is nonverbal autistic, which we didn't know about when grandfather-in-law passed away. I'm not sure if he'll ever be able to live on his own or take care of himself after we're gone. My husband and I always planned that, if that were the case, our son could move into the property's guest house and rent out the main home, which is currently being used as a family beach house for weddings, events, or reunions, etc. He could survive off that income and the money from the portfolio to pay for a caretaker. This would give him a chance to live independently. If he turned out to not need additional support in the future, then it was his to pass on, live in, or whatever. Before anyone asks, we did not forget about our other 2 children. Our daughter will inherit the house Bill currently lives in. Our second son will inherit our current home. Yes, their inheritance will be significantly less than their older brothers, but it was never our money to give away. Grandfather-in-law, who was the original owner of the property, made it very clear that he was leaving this for my oldest son and him alone. We want to stand by his wishes. My Mill and Phil both knew of this plan. They told me they were supportive of my efforts to provide for our son's future and that I was a good mother for thinking so far ahead. I was deeply upset by this news and asked why he was changing his mind after promising his father and my husband that he would pass this on to his grandson, the great-grandson. He said that he always intended to respect his father's wishes, but that our son, Henry IV, didn't live up to the namesake expectations that he was sure grandfather had for an heir. Yep, my son wasn't worthy because he was autistic. Since Phil knew that my husband would honor his word and leave it to our son, he thought it would be best if he cut my husband out altogether and left it to his other son, Michael. I asked him why he would leave it to someone as reckless as Michael when his youngest, Laura, was more financially responsible. He said it was because only his son could be an heir. Apparently, my mill has also been pressing for months to give Michael the home. Michael told Phil that he deserved better than our charity, arguing that since we had 2 homes that we saved and paid for on our own, it was only fair if he was given grandfather's property and money. I immediately excused myself, grabbed my kids, and left the house. My husband and I talked. While he's upset about what happened, legally Grandpa left the home to his dad, and Phil isn't obligated to leave it to him in spite of his promise. He says that he's sure we'd find another way to provide for our son if he needs it. That, however, isn't good enough for me. We busted our butts and sacrificed so that we could give all of our children a home to live in someday. Now we're being put into a position where we have to choose which of our children gets a home. Not to mention, if our son does need additional support and income, he's going to have to live with us and off our income and will not have the chance to be independent. This is when I thought about the dirty little secret buried in the family skeleton closet. 2 years ago, my husband and his 2 siblings were given those DNA tests for Christmas and found out that Michael was only their half-brother. They confronted Mill, who admitted to having an affair. She didn't know if Michael was Phil's or her lover's child when she got pregnant. Apparently, she ended the affair for good then and hasn't strayed since. She begged her kids not to tell Phil because Michael needed his support. She said Phil would disown him and divorce her if he ever knew the truth. For the sake of keeping the peace, and since this wasn't my side of the family drama, I agreed to never speak about it again. But since we're breaking promises and going behind each other's backs, I just might print out his half-brother status and mail it anonymously to Phil. This, of course, will implode the family while I happily watch from the sidelines, as well as securing my husband's and my son's place as the inheritors of the family fortune. After all, only a son can be an heir, and Michael is not his son. A few days later, I added to the post in response to people commenting on the post and readability. Edit: I'd like to give some more context to those in the comments. I am not rich by any means at all. My parents grew up in poverty and worked their way up to lower middle class. I'm not educated beyond high school, and even then, I was average at best. I'm neurodivergent, like my son, but at a higher function level, and did not do well in subjects that did not interest me. My husband and I met on a high school track field, and it was love at first sight. His parents did not want us to be together. I was not the girl they picked out for him, and I didn't come from the right kind of family or the same religious background. My husband knew choosing me was going to make his life harder and that he'd have less support, but he did it anyway. He lost his college fund, so he joined the military. I worked in a pizza shop while he was in training. We got married right after, and I moved into his 2-bedroom apartment he shared with a guy from his work. I worked at a Waffle House around the corner while he took college classes online. We worked hard to get where we are now. He got out after finishing college. We moved back home and bought our first house, a small 3-bed, 2-bath. I want to point out that in the first 5 years of our marriage, while they didn't accept me, they were never mean or rude to me. They called their son regularly. They were always cordial regarding me, asked how I was, and always sent gifts on Christmas and our birthdays. After we moved back and they actually got to know me, we became a lot closer. I also converted to their religion, and I felt like they were starting to accept me. When I got pregnant with our son, I was officially a part of the family. I did not see any reason not to trust them or believe them when my grandfather-in-law asked me to name my son after him. My husband is a very sincere and honest person, so when he told me they were serious, that's all I needed to hear. I agreed to it for the sole purpose of securing a better future for my son. I wanted to name my son after my own father and grandfather, and they knew that. It was incredibly difficult to go to my dad and tell him I changed my mind and he wouldn't be named after him, but instead after my husband and father-in-law. I could tell he was disappointed, but he agreed that I was doing the right thing for our son. So for them to put me through that, robbing me of the chance to pick the name for our firstborn under the promise of he will want for nothing, and then to snatch it away because he wasn't the kind of namesake they wanted, because he was autistic, because he wasn't the perfect heir they imagined. And they expect me to bite my tongue and be okay with my son being screwed over? Hell no. We're going to be visiting my extended family for the summer next week. I'm going to have my friend mail it from a local post office a week or two after we leave, so there's not a trace back to us. We'll see what unfolds from a distance. Edit. Jesus, people, I get it. I will clean up the story. Look, I added periods. Are you happy now? Small update on same post a week later. Small update. I've taken the comments seriously and have formulated a plan to orchestrate this from the shadows. So far, I've executed steps 1 and 2. My Mill has 2 sisters. One lives only an hour away, has a drinking problem, and loosens up after she's had a few. I figured if anyone had dirt on who Michael's biological father is, it would be her. I dropped by unexpectedly at Gray Tanny's house with a nice bottle of tequila. After a few drinks, she was in the golden state. Sober enough to accurately spill the tea, but drunk enough to forget telling me. I've got a name and learned that he was local to the area. I've decided to hire a PI whom I just got off the phone with. I've asked him to find the guy and let me know when he does. I'll update with the next step once he's been found. Final update on same post a month later. Final update. I apologize for making everyone wait so long to close this saga. I was visiting my family when one of my children got very sick and was hospitalized for a week. They are doing well, we are home now, and they will be getting surgery to correct the problem soon, so there is no need to worry on that end. That being said, up until a few days ago, my entire focus was on my child and their well-being, so I put all of this on the back burner. I found Michael's biological father fairly quickly via PI and requested that the PI collect an item with saliva on it. I sent it to a DNA company along with Michael's toothbrush, which I stole while visiting a few weeks ago before I left, to see if they were in fact a paternal match before I put my plan into motion. I received confirmation via email, requested Michael's father's address from my PI, and got to work. I called my friend, told her to expect a package in the mail, and asked if she could open it and put the sealed, addressed, and stamped envelope in the mail for me. She agreed. Inside that envelope was a letter I typed and printed from the hotel office area, claiming to be my Mill. It stated that I, the Mill, recently found out via DNA testing kit that my husband, Phil, wasn't Michael's father and that the only other man it could be would be him, the recipient. I told him that I had hired a PI to collect his DNA so that I, and he had 100% proof of his paternity to Michael, and the DNA was a match. I told him Michael wanted to meet him at least once so he could have some closure and offered him a large sum of money if he could make this happen. He told me that he understood and agreed, but that if Michael wanted to continue a relationship with him, he would do it. He never had any children of his own when he was younger and was excited to learn he had a son. I told him that was Michael's choice, but to never contact me or my husband, Phil, again. I also told him to bring the paternity and DNA tests with him, as Michael wanted to see them and I didn't have any extra copies. I gave him specific instructions not to knock or ring the doorbell, since my daughter, Laura, gets notifications on her phone when someone rings, and she didn't need to know about him unless Michael wanted her to. I told him the door would be unlocked, explaining it always is for family dinners, and that we would be waiting in the dining room. In order to spare Laura from being dragged into this any more than she already was, I called her a few days earlier. I told her that I had bought tickets to a show happening on the same night as the family dinner, had forgotten about them before I went on vacation, and asked if she and her husband would like the tickets. She said yes and thanked me. I went online, purchased 2 tickets, and then texted them to her. The only wrench in my plan I didn't anticipate was being in the hospital with my child at the time that all hell broke loose. I was in the hospital with our child for about 3 days while my husband was at the hotel with our other 2 children when he got the call from Phil. Mill's affair partner, B of A, shows up as scheduled with the DNA and paternity tests and thanks my Mill for arranging this meeting. He apologizes to my Phil for what he did so many years ago, saying that he hopes Phil can forgive him someday, and then hands the papers to my Phil. He then goes to Michael and tells him he's so grateful that Michael wanted to meet him and asks if he has any questions for him. Mill doesn't say a word and is completely frozen. Michael has no idea why this man is shaking his hand and trying to hug him as Phil is frantically flipping through the papers. Boom. Phil starts screaming and cursing and comes at B of A to hit him when Mill comes between them. She starts begging Phil for forgiveness, saying that it was so long ago and she hasn't seen B of A in 20+ years, etc. Phil screams at B of A to get out before he kills him, and B of A takes off out the door. Phil flips his shit, calls Mill a lying W, tells her to get out of his house, and says to expect divorce paperwork from his attorney. She drops to her knees, begging him not to do this and to think of Michael. Phil then turns to Michael and tells him that he's relieved that a lying, stealing, POS drug addict was never his son. He tells Michael to get out and take his ex-wife, Mill, with him. Phil then storms out of the dining room, starts packing all of Mill's things, and throws them in the hall by the front door. Michael eventually takes his sobbing mother off the floor and leaves. After they're gone, Phil called my husband and told him what happened, followed by Michael. Michael says that Mill is with him at our house, the one he's renting from us. He then demands that my husband abandon me and our sick child and fly home so that Michael can talk to his dad, Phil, and fix things. Michael adds that he doesn't want Mill living with him when he moves to his new house. My husband tells him no, that he will come home as scheduled and talk to Phil then, and hangs up. My husband then calls me and tells me what has happened. I ask him what he wants to do. He says he's okay and that right now, we're just going to focus on our family. We'll deal with this when we get home. We turn off our phones until then. We get home, and I have a million missed calls from everyone. Apparently, Michael got drunk and showed up at Phil's house later that night, demanding Phil take Mill back. Michael argued that she's Phil's wife, not his, that it's Phil's job to take care of her, and that there isn't room for her at Michael's new house. Phil, as predicted, tells him that there is no new house, now or ever, that only his son, Henry III, my husband, will ever inherit that house, and to get out. Michael then punched Phil, and Phil called the cops and had Michael arrested. Phil froze all of the bank accounts so Mill couldn't bail him out. SIL, Laura, finds out about this the next morning when Mill calls her freaking out that Michael never came home the night before and Phil has blocked Mill's number so she can't call him. Laura calls her dad, Phil, and tells him what happened the night before and that Michael is in jail. Laura then lets it slip that she already knew about Michael's paternity. Phil then asks if Michael or Mill knew. Laura tells him that they did. Phil told Laura he was disappointed that she didn't tell him the truth before and hangs up. Laura called Mill and told her Michael was in jail. Mill tried to bail him out, but couldn't because her cards were frozen. SIL, Laura, asked her husband if he'd bail Michael out, but he refused since her father, Phil, and his own father are business associates. He said he's not going to get involved. And that was that. Michael was in jail for a few days on assault charges. When we got home and got caught up to speed on everything that happened, my husband went and bailed Michael out, solely for his niece's sake, and gave him a ride back to our rental home. He then went to Phil's house so they could talk. Phil asked if my husband knew, and my husband told him he did. Phil asked him why he didn't tell him the truth. My husband told him he wanted to, but that his mom, Mill, begged him not to, that she was sorry, that it would never happen again, and that he wanted to protect both Phil and Mill and his siblings from the pain of a divorce. Phil told him he understood, that his mother shouldn't have put that burden on him, and that Phil doesn't know what he would have done if he were in my husband's position, but that he forgives him. My husband told Phil he bailed Michael out. Phil said he doesn't care and that my husband can be there for Michael as his brother, but Phil is done having Michael for a son. Phil says that Michael knew for years that someone who wasn't his father had bailed him out and taken care of him again and again, yet Michael never appreciated it, and that Phil was done. My husband asked Phil if he was really divorcing his mother, and Phil said he was. If she had told him about the affair when it happened, they maybe could have worked past it. But she lied to him for decades, and he can't forgive that. He can't forgive that she passed off another man's child as his son. He's done with her and never wants to see either of them again. Phil then apologized to my husband about the house, saying that he knew changing it was wrong and that all of this has reminded him about the importance of keeping one's vows or promises. He would have his attorney correct the will to its original state before filing divorce proceedings. Phil and Mill signed a prenup with an infidelity clause, so she will get nothing she didn't come into the marriage with. Therefore, she cannot interfere with the will or the house anymore. Phil did, however, request that my husband honor his request and not allow Mill or Michael access to the property. My husband agreed but said that he still needed to make sure his mother was taken care of. Regardless of what happened, she's still his mother. Phil then offered to build a mill suite at our rental home with Michael, so she could have somewhere to live and someone could keep an eye on Michael and his kids. My husband asked if Phil would drop the charges against Michael for the sake of his kids, and my Phil said he'd see what he could do about it. My husband thanked Phil for talking to him and said that he'd see him again once our child was feeling better. My husband called my Mill, who is still a wreck, told her what they talked about, and mentioned her moving in with Michael. She lost it. My husband then reminded her of their prenup, told her that he had kept her secret for as long as he did, and said now he needed to stand with his dad. She reluctantly agreed. He also spoke to Michael, who was also pissed off that he wouldn't be getting the property and now would have to share the house with his mother. My husband reminded Michael that we bailed him out and are letting him live in our home at cost. The least he can do for us and his mother is let her live there too. Michael also reluctantly agreed. Finally, my husband called his sister, Laura, to see how she was doing. She and Phil had a long talk, and they're doing okay. Phil was disappointed that neither Laura nor my husband told him the truth, and that hurts, but Phil still loves her and will always be there for her. He just needs some time to work through things. Phil is going to call her and my husband when he's ready for us to have a family dinner again, but specified that they'd be going out to eat from now on. My husband and I had a long talk about how he feels. He says he feels good getting the weight off his chest and having it out in the open. He feels bad about his mom, but she made her choices and has to stand by them. He will make sure that she is taken care of if Michael drops the ball. We aren't sure what that looks like yet, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I asked him how he felt about the will being reinstated. He said that he's relieved that we don't have to worry about our son anymore, and that he's grateful that everything worked out the way God intended it to. As for Michael's biological father, B of A, he emailed me, the fake Mill, after the dinner and asked what the hell happened. I replied that my husband, Phil, couldn't handle seeing the man who slept with his wife in person and lost it. I told B of A he was free to reach out to Michael and arrange a meeting if he wanted to, but not to contact me again. I sent him Michael's phone number and deleted the email address. I have no idea if they are in contact or have any current plans to meet. Thank you to everyone for following my story and for all of your advice. I hope I never have to do this ever again. Being a master manipulator just isn't for me and is, quite frankly, exhausting. But for my son, it will always be worth it. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.